falling for fire. Asher Blackwood was a hero. At least that's what the world saw. A firefighter with a chiseled jaw and a confident smirk. He carried people from burning buildings, soot-streaked and breathless. A living embodiment of courage. Women adored him. Men respected him. And the city's newspapers plastered his face across their pages whenever a new act of heroism needed celebrating. But behind the uniform, beneath the accolades, lurked something far darker. Asher didn't just fight fires. He craved them, the spark. The first time Asher watched a fire consume a house, he had been 6 years old. He still remembered the way the flames danced, licking at the wooden beams like hungry beasts. The world had been quiet then, except for the roar of destruction. He had stood, transfixed, as if the inferno were whispering secrets only he could understand. From that moment he was hooked. His parents thought his fascination was normal. What little boy didn't love fire trucks and sirens? But while other kids dreamed of being superheroes, Asher dreamed of standing at the heart of an inferno, feeling the heat wrap around him like a lover's embrace. Becoming a firefighter had been the perfect disguise. It let him be close to the thing he loved most. And no one ever suspected a thing. The girl with the matchstick eyes. Then came Lena Carter. She wasn't like the others, the groupies who threw themselves at him, the women who whispered his name with awe. No, Lena was different. She was fire. From the moment she walked into the bar where Asher and his crew were celebrating a rescue, he felt it. A slow, burning awareness. She had wild auburn hair, the color of embers, and eyes that gleamed like molten gold under the dim lights. She wasn't looking at him with the starry-eyed admiration he was used to. She was studying him, as if she could see straight through the carefully constructed mask he wore. "You're the famous Asher Blackwood," she said, swirling a whiskey in her glass. "The man who runs into fire while everyone else runs away." He smirked, leaning closer. "And what about you? You don't look like the running type." She tilted her head. "That depends on what's chasing me." A slow, deliberate game began between them that night, and Asher was ready to play. Fire and gasoline. Lena was an arson investigator. The irony wasn't lost on him. She spent her days searching for the cause of the very thing that set his blood alight. And she was good at it. She spoke about fire as if it were alive, something with purpose and intent. "It has a personality," she told him one night as they lay in bed, bodies still tangled. "Some fires are desperate, some are angry, and some are just hungry." Asher watched her, his fingers tracing invisible patterns along her spine. "What about the ones that are beautiful?" he murmured. She looked up at him then, something flickering in her gaze. "You talk about it like you love it." His lips curved, but he didn't answer. Because he did. And he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep pretending otherwise. The secret inferno started small. A warehouse fire in an abandoned part of town. No casualties, no major damage. Just enough to make the news, just enough to let Asher feel it again. But small wasn't enough. It never was. Each time he told himself it would be the last. Each time he felt the rush, the thrill, the uncontrollable power that surged through him as he stood in the middle of the blaze. He was always careful, always made sure the fires were controlled. Until one wasn't. Until the night everything burned. The fire that changed everything. Lena had been investigating a string of suspicious blazes. But it wasn't until that night that she came face to face with the truth. Asher had set the fire in an abandoned apartment complex, just like the others. He had stood there, watching the flames stretch toward the sky, feeling the heat lick at his skin. Then a scream. A woman was inside. His heart slammed against his ribs. No one was supposed to be there. Without hesitation, Asher did what he did best. He ran in. The flames were his element, but panic clawed at his throat as he searched through the smoke. His lungs burned, sweat dripped down his spine, but finally, there, A woman, curled against the floor, coughing violently. He carried her out just as the building collapsed. He had saved her, but he had almost killed her. And Lena was waiting outside, staring at him with eyes that saw everything. The confrontation. Lena didn't say anything that night, but the next morning, she stood in his apartment, holding a stack of reports in her hands. "Asher," she said softly, "tell me the truth." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "You already know, don't you?" Her hands trembled. "Tell me anyway." He stepped closer. "I never meant to hurt anyone." "But you did," she whispered. "And you still would if I hadn't found out." A long silence stretched between them. Then, she reached for her phone. Asher's world tilted. "Lena, don't." Her fingers hovered over the screen. "I love you," he said. The words felt foreign, unfamiliar. But they were true. "I never wanted you to know. I never wanted you to look at me like this." "Like what?" "Like I'm a monster." Her throat worked as she swallowed. "Aren't you?" His jaw clenched. "If I was, I wouldn't have saved that woman." Her breath hitched. "But you wouldn't have needed to save her if you hadn't set the fire." His hands curled into fists. She was right. For the first time in his life, he wished he could change who he was. But fire doesn't change. Consumes. The fall of Asher Blackwood. Lena gave him a choice. Run. Disappear. Leave before she reported him. But Asher wasn't a coward. That night, he walked into the firehouse and turned himself in. The headlines the next day were brutal. Hero turned arsonist. Firefighter's dark secret exposed. His crew was shocked. His city was betrayed. And Lena? She never spoke to him again. Epilogue: The Man in the Flames. In prison, Asher had no fire to fuel him. No sirens, no embers, no smoke curling into the sky. Only cold, gray walls and memories that haunted him like ghosts. But sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he could still see it. The fire. Still dancing, still whispering, still waiting. And deep down, he knew. One day he'd set another. And this time, there'd be no saving anyone. The end. Falling for fire. The story of a man who burned too bright and the woman who tried to put him out.